And that brings us to the biggest threat, which is that many of these MAGA cult members have been able to obtain roles as county election officials who will have a role in certifying state election results. Because when you're a spoiled rich boy who's been handed everything he's ever had in life, why work hard when you can have your henchmen just hand you the election?
Hi, my name is Reese Waters, and I'm troubled. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the page. Huh? Oh, that? Oh, yeah, there's a Patriots jersey back there. You'll find out why.
And unlike Harris, who's been crisscrossing the country holding events in battleground states, Trump has mainly stayed at his Florida mansion, choosing to golf rather than campaign. If you didn't know any better, it would seem like Trump doesn't even want to win the election. It is hard to believe, because beyond his own ego, the stakes could not be higher for him, with the real possibility that he could go to prison if he loses as a result of his numerous criminal trials. With his very freedom at stake, you'd think he'd want to run the best campaign anyone has ever seen.
This is all very true. At the same time, I don't know how many different gears Donald Trump has. I think meltdown mode is pretty much standard issue. Like, you have to play the game for years before you get to a point where you get a patch, where you get like a different mode. Like, I don't think there's been enough time that humans have been in existence for us to download a different mode Donald Trump.
That is, unless he thinks he doesn't even have to actually win on November 5th to become president. As The Guardian lays it out, it appears that Trump could once again attempt to try to steal the election if he loses, having learned from his 2020 failed endeavor and coming to the table better prepared this time. The Guardian points out the Republican National Committee's election litigation team is now being led by Christina Bobb, an election denier who is now facing criminal charges for her efforts to overturn the 2020 race.
You know, years from now, I am going to sit my grandkids over my knee, God willing, and tell them about a time where you couldn't have anybody in charge of your election team with charges, or a candidate with charges. Oh, those were the days.
The RNC claims it is recruiting an army of 100,000 poll observers who could provide significant disruption during voting and counting. But more significantly, the idea that the 2020 election was stolen has moved from the fringes to becoming a pillar of the Republican Party.
One thing that always struck me as odd about these election deniers, how come they never deny any elections that they won? Huh? They never deny any elections that they won. They don't deny none of the congressmen or senators that are election deniers have shaken any faith in their own elections. Don't you find that weird? So apparently we were split up until 2020. Now all of a sudden you just win everything. Is that what I understand? Now I believe these people really come in two brands. You have your election denier who legitimately thinks that the election was stolen, and you have your election denier who doesn't care if the election was stolen, probably knows that it wasn't, but wants to do whatever they possibly can in order to put Republicans in power. Now, who you really need to be concerned about is B, because the people who legitimately think that the election was stolen, as slow as they may be, no amount of watching is going to invent a stolen election. When he gets his orange busted again, they will have no recourse. But B, mind you, it's kind of like being with a suspicious partner. Is she suspicious because you always coming home late? Or is she suspicious because that's her personality?
And that brings us to the biggest threat, which is that many of these MAGA cult members have been able to obtain roles as county election officials who will have a role in certifying state election results. In a new report from the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, titled Election Certification Under Threat, they point out that since 2020, more than 30 county officials across the country have voted to deny or delay certifying election results in violation of law, often citing false claims of voter fraud or irregularities. Among those, officials are avowed 2020 election deniers, individuals who acted as fake presidential electors for Donald Trump, and a criminally convicted participant in the January 6th insurrection who was later removed from office.
Now, as annoyed as this makes me, the fact that people who hold these wild beliefs can find themselves in position to actually slow down and be problematic during a presidential election makes me wonder if we even deserve to continue our democracy. These are the people that we are tasked with finishing our group project.
And in the swing states of Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania, Rolling Stone magazine and the independent journalist at a Substack called American Doom identified nearly 70 pro-Trump election conspiracists currently working as county election officials who have questioned the validity of elections or delayed or refused to certify results. Perhaps all of this explains why Trump doesn't appear to be taking this campaign too seriously.
And if you recall, in that leak of Roger Stone,
Rod should hold a press conference today and call for Trump's impeachment. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. I'm going to do it. I'm supporting impeachment. I'm supporting impeachment. He must be removed. His son Jared must be prosecuted. I want to know how money changed hands on Bannon. I want a federal investigation. I'm filing a complaint with the FBI this afternoon. Fuck these people. Fuck these people. Right. So, right, exactly. Which is why I'm for the impeachment. I want impeachment. I'm going to work very hard for it. I'm not kidding. He betrayed Bernie, betrayed Rudy, he betrayed everybody. So he has to go. He has to go. Run again. You'll get your fucking brains beat in. Right. Which is good, unfortunately, for Pat, because he's easy to find. Fuck these people. Let's be very clear. There is no Bannon, cocksucker. It's one sentence. So if you're in a meeting and he says that, you punch him in the mouth as hard as you can to make your point. It's one sentence. We're not stupid. There is no paperwork, you cocksucker. He needs to be impeached. He needs to be denounced and impeached. The greatest single mistake in American history. Greatest single mistake. He's surrounded by morons, and he surrounded himself by morons. And a good long sentence in prison, he'll give him a chance to think about it. Because the Southern District's coming for him, and he did nothing. You want to fight? Let's fight. Fuck you. Fuck you and your abortionist bitch daughter.
No, the other leak. Go to the other leak.
But at least this time, when they do it, you have a lawyer and a judge whose phone number standing by so you can stop him. We made no preparations last time. None.
I was at the Capitol, so I'm prepared to go back.
Well, that may not be necessary. There are technical and legal steps that we have to take to try to have a more honest election. We're not there yet, but there are things that can be done. It's a long conversation. I'm working with changes in state law, real-time voter list monitoring, going to court as we just did to challenge some of the voter lists. The election's not tomorrow. We went into court to sue in Michigan over the handling of ballots, which we sued in half a dozen places. And then we're finally now on offensive footing.
When I reacted to that video, like many of you, I pointed to this very real possibility that this is what they had planned.
Because when you're a spoiled rich boy who's been handed everything he's ever had in life, why work hard when you can have your henchmen just hand you the election?
Eat, Joy, eat! Here's a moment I just want to take some time out for a personal pet peeve of mine, because it always drives me up an absolute wall when the people that have the most privilege have to do the least, and then have the nerve to turn the rest of us and say, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. You don't even know how to tie boots. They were always tied for you.
And here's the evidence that he might think that too. Here's Donald Trump many times saying, we don't need votes.
I tell my people, I don't need any votes. We got all the votes we need. I don't need votes. We don't need votes. We don't need votes. We got more votes than anybody's ever had. You don't have to vote. Don't worry about voting. The voting, we got plenty of votes. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians.
Now, I did a whole video about the media giving him a free pass for the you don't have to vote thing. But just to add a little bit more validity to this report, these are what the polls are looking like right now, as he's saying, you don't have to vote.
We know that 4 years ago, Donald Trump tried to keep himself in power despite losing the election. We know that he's never disavowed what he did then. And we know now that county officials are going to try to avoid certifying the election. We've now, in the report that we just put out, we documented more than 30 of them who are in place now, who have previously failed to certify elections. These were elections in 2022, 2023, often not particularly consequential elections.
Sure.
They were doing it as a run-through before the real event, which is this fall.
I also have to wonder, and I have expressed my frustration with the left continually being on the back foot when it comes to the right skullduggery. What safeguards were put in place to prevent this kind of nonsense? We had 4 years and all of the executive powers. You know, speaking of which, didn't the Supreme Court just essentially make the president the king? Hey, Biden.
So what happens is you have a set of deadlines where counties need to certify by a certain date, then the state needs to certify by a certain date, then there's a date where the Electoral College needs to vote, and then Congress needs to vote. Once you start pushing those back, and if Fulton County in Georgia or other counties are not certifying, then it gets to usually first the Secretary of State and eventually the governor, who has a deadline to certify the state's votes, but they may not have final tallies from the counties. And that could cause a pileup of the whole system.
Yeah.
It's not entirely clear what that looks like, but
Sure.
it certainly would give an opening for Congress to do things that we may not want them doing, other than just merely counting the votes that actually went through.
Or it ends up in court, right? We end up with litigation. Let's say Georgia ends up in huge litigation, and then somehow or other, nobody gets 270 because one state can't get their votes in time. That then goes to the House of Representatives. Republicans control 26 states. Democrats control 23. They just vote 26-23 and make Trump the president. Kamala Harris could win by 12 million votes and it wouldn't matter. Congress would just decide. And then the other option is it goes to the Supreme Court. And we all know what John Roberts will do. He and his 5 friends will make Donald Trump the president. So 6 people could make Trump president, or 26 Congress members, or 26 states.
Which brings me to the reason why that jersey is behind there. So essentially what she has laid out is a plan that could bog down the system, subjugate the will of the people, whatever that may be, so that your side can maintain power, so that these 26 or these Supreme Court justices can decide who will lead this country. And I have to ask, what part of patriotism, what part of America, what part of democracy is that? Yet at the same time, these are the people who have the market cornered on patriotism. These are the people who always want to talk about 1776. These are the people with the flags all over their house. These fake patriots are trying to take over our democracy and at the same time don't have to suffer the slings and arrows of being anti-American. And that is patently unacceptable.
I mean, the good news is that what these county officials are likely to try to do is clearly illegal. And every one of these states have mechanisms to stop that from happening. And actually, a lot of states like Michigan have officials who are getting out there. The Secretary of State of Michigan has sent letters to these county officials saying, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And if you do it, there will be consequences.
Sure.
The worrisome part is in a place like Georgia, where instead you have the state election board seeming to encourage this kind of activity, even though it's against the law.
These people are no more patriots than whoever made that jersey. And it is time we started talking down on them as such. And to think, we have to deal with all of this because he's too immature to accept he lost anything, ever. Because we got a man who was so childish as to think that he knows more about science than the scientists. He knows more about foreign policy than the diplomats. He knows more about golf than the golfers. He knows more about medicine than the doctors. If there was anybody else in our society who told you that, we would ask them if they would like a sandwich while you pass them on your way into Subway. But if it's Donald Trump, not only is he in position to become the president of the United States again, but he has a sycophant of people listening to this fourth grader yelling from the top of the slide that he's king of the world. And that is why I'm troubled. Sincere thanks to everybody who's reached out to me and submitted suggestions for videos. Keep them coming. I take submissions for ideas for a video, suggestions for Racist of the Week. If you have something that just troubles you, or you just want to send me a note, because I love getting those notes, go ahead and shoot me an email at reese@reesewaters.com. I also have a newsletter that I send out periodically, so you'll be receiving that as well. You can also sign up on my website, reesewaters.com.